Hello and welcome. Today, we're tackling a huge topic, something that touches every single one of us. We're diving into the legal system's answer to a really personal question. What happens to everything you've built, saved, and owned after you're gone? This is the world of succession.
Really think about that for a second. It's a heavy question, right? Who decides what happens to your home, your car, your savings, even your debts? Well, thankfully, it's not just left up to chance. There's a whole area of law designed to bring order to what could otherwise be a really chaotic process.
And that's where the law of succession comes in. This is the official playbook, the legal framework that makes sure there's an orderly transfer of everything you leave behind. It identifies who gets what, and it lays out all their rights and responsibilities. All right, so to really wrap our heads around this, we've got to start with the basics, the fundamental building blocks of succession. Let's get into the key terms you need to know. First up is the deceased estate. Now, when most of us hear the word estate, we probably think of mansions and money, all the good stuff. But here's what's so important. An estate also includes liabilities. We're talking debts, loans, anything the person owed. So it's the complete financial picture, the assets and the debts that gets passed on. So who gets this estate? Well, they've got a name: beneficiaries. These are the people, or sometimes even institutions like a favorite charity, that the rules of succession point to as the rightful inheritors. It doesn't matter if they're named in a will or identified by the law, they're the ones who ultimately benefit. Okay, this is where things get really interesting. Because in the world of succession, it feels like everything comes down to one simple but massive question. Did the person leave a valid will? This one document, or the lack of it, is the critical fork in the road that determines the entire journey ahead. And this slide lays it out perfectly. You've got two main paths. On the left, testamentary succession. This is the with a will path. Think of the will as the deceased's personal instruction manual. Their wishes are the guiding star here. But on the right, you have intestate succession. This is what happens when there's no will. In that case, the law steps in with a default plan, a kind of preset blueprint that decides who inherits, usually based on family relationships. Now, while those are the big two, it's worth knowing there's actually a third, kind of rare path. It's called contractual succession, or if you want the fancy legal term, pactum successorium. This is when inheritance is decided by a contract that was signed when the person was still alive. A good example is certain types of marriage contracts. It's a special case for sure, but it helps to paint the full picture. But just when you think you've got it figured out, there's another layer. And this is something really fascinating about South African law. It's not just one set of rules, but a dual system, where two completely different philosophies about what inheritance even is exist right next to each other. So what you have is the common law system, which comes from Roman Dutch and English traditions, running in parallel with various systems of customary law. These are the long-standing traditions and customs of indigenous African communities. And the key thing to get here is that both are recognized by the state. They have equal legal weight. And the difference between them is massive, and it comes down to their core purpose. You can see it right here. The common law of succession is mainly about one thing: regulating the transfer of wealth. It's focused on the stuff. But customary law, its primary goal is totally different. It's about preserving the family unit, the community, and the social structure. It's about keeping the support systems going. This quote just nails it, doesn't it? It perfectly sums up the whole philosophical divide. One system is about what happens to your property. The other is about what happens to your people and your place in the community. And that fundamental difference really shapes everything that follows in each system. Okay, now it doesn't matter which system we're talking about, common or customary, will or no will, none of that can even get started until 4 universal ground rules are met. You can think of these as the non-negotiable entry requirements for succession to even begin. So let's walk through them. First, the person must have died. Seems obvious, right? But legally, death is the official starting pistol. Second, there has to be something to pass on, an estate with assets or duties. No estate, no succession. Third, the beneficiary has to be alive when the person dies. And there's a really cool legal idea here that even protects a conceived but unborn child, making sure they don't miss out. And finally, number 4, the beneficiary has to be legally competent, meaning they are legally allowed to inherit. So all this legal theory, all these rules, why does this matter to you? Well, it's pretty simple, really. understanding all this is about understanding how to control your own legacy. It's about the choices you can make right now to decide what happens later on. All right, let's do a quick flyby of the big takeaways. First, succession is simply the legal map for what happens to your estate. Second, the biggest fork in that road is the will. It decides whether your wishes lead the way or if the law's default plan kicks in. Third, remember that the whole point of succession can be different. It might be about wealth or it might be about family. And finally, don't forget those 4 ground rules. They're the starting line for everything. And that leaves us with one final big question. The law provides the map, and it shows you the different paths. Knowing what those options are is the first, most powerful step you can take. So, which path will your estate take? The one that you design yourself, or the one the law decides for you? Thank you so much for watching, and hey, don't forget to like and subscribe.